The views expressed, opinions given, and any communication made between the hosts and guests of What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Para X Radio, EMC Network, or all services that play this show. The hosts and services are not responsible for the actions of their guests, and the original rights of all intellectual property is retained by the creator, and all work is used with either permission or Creative Commons license. The show is for entertainment purposes only.
Dunham and Phil Thomas.
Well, I can see, Phil, that the Wham-Bootin did not get you.
No, he did not. No.
Well, that's good to know.
Yes, Wham-Bootin did not get me.
Yeah, well, and a strange thing happened on episode 72.
Yeah.
It sounded like we had some EVPs recorded over the dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that?
I don't know. I think maybe it was you had died in the future and come back to send us messages.
Yeah, it's possible, yeah.
Yeah, but if you listen very closely, you can hear a ghostly Phil talking over the dialogue.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like 3 times.
Listen really closely.
And you talked about beer.
Yeah, I did.
You know, it made me want to try some beer.
It did.
You saw the picture I sent you last Saturday?
Yeah.
Alison and I went to Outback. It takes her a long time to pick a beer, and as soon as she picks the beer, she can only get one type, but this time she's like, bring me a flight of beers. And I'm not a beer guy.
Yeah. Right.
But I told her, I said, if you order another one of those, I will drink half. I will try each one.
Nice.
And so that's what we were doing. They were bringing us boomerangs of beer.
And what was your consensus on that? Did you like the beer?
The pale ale.
Okay.
I liked. And there was a brown hazelnut.
Okay.
That was really quite nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you remember the brand or?
No.
No.
Outback beer. I don't know. It was helped I was drinking Jameson's on the side.
Jameson's nice.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
This is episode 73.
Yes, it is.
The Paranormal Life. And we have a special guest tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's been talking about coming onto the show for some time. She's been on a lot of other paranormal radio shows to tell her story. Her name is Cathy Gasch. She's written a book called My Life Amidst the Paranormal. This is what it says in the book. Cathy has been able to sense the paranormal all her life. Take a journey with her through haunted houses and ancient ruins across 3 different countries, and discover for yourself what it's like to be sensitive to the paranormal. Mischievous ghosts, spectral apparitions, and forgotten souls abound in this collection of true spooky tales.
Yeah.
You scared, Phil?
Oh, I am, yes.
Yes.
I must admit that I'm very frightened right now.
Well, here you go. Wham-Bootins and ghosts and sensitives. Oh,
right.
my.
Oh, wow. Oh, my.
Oh, my. Well, she's on episode 73 and episode 74 with us.
Yeah.
Cathy, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Trying to stay warm.
Yeah, what's the weather out there like?
Well, we've had sub-freezing temperatures for well over 3 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and over the weekend we actually had it up to 68, which is good pneumonia weather.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now it's back down into the 30s, and it is snowing like crazy out there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's coming for us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're next.
Headed in that direction.
It's a nice snowy day. Do you like to cuddle up and read a book and get warm, that kind of thing? Have some hot cocoa, some cappuccino?
Oh, definitely. I have 7 cats, so when it's a little on the chilly side, I'm sitting in a nice comfy spot with 2 or 3 cats on me at any given time. So I stay nice and warm.
Nice.
Well, that's good. There's a public service announcement. If you're cold this winter, get a cat.
Right.
Yes, or 2.
Or
3.
2, or 7, apparently.
Yes.
So your name is more than just a name. It's a lifestyle.
Definitely.
Yeah. You've written this lovely book, and Phil and I have been reading up on this book, and it's mostly, it has an introduction about you in the beginning, but it's mostly probably some of your most, and I'm sure not inclusive, prominent experiences with the other side. And there are some fun ones, and there are some really dark ones in that book. And you've also traveled a lot and met a lot of international ghosts.
Yes.
I was really...
Indeed.
The fun thing about the book is that it's not just an anthology of ghost stories. It's also like a travel guide about your many trips to the United Kingdom and various places you've stayed over there. And you not only write about ghosts itself, you also write about, and this is very important in ghost stories, the setting, the atmosphere.
Yes.
These spooky Irish castles that you found yourself in the Republic of Ireland. And that's been part of the fun, is not just reading about the ghosts, but also reading about where they've been dwelling, for how many centuries, as Great Britain is known to have ancient ghosts. How did all this begin? When did you start being able to see spirits?
I suppose you could say it was at a very young age, probably around 5 or 6.
Wow.
And it all started in the house that my father bought for our family, and he was renovating it. It was an old Victorian that needed a lot of work. And whenever I was there with my mother and my father, it seemed like things were always coming up missing. I was actually watching things move in the house. I saw shadows that shouldn't have been there because nobody was walking around. I could hear people walking. And as I was growing up, things like that you just saw on TV, but you didn't really talk about them because you were considered nuts. So I never really told anybody about my experiences until I was close to being in my teens.
Wow. So, and who did you tell?
I finally admitted things to my sister, who was 5 years older than myself, and she admitted to me that she had seen things in that same house, but kept it to herself. Once we compared notes, we finally started talking to my mother, and my mother admitted she had seen things as well.
Oh, wow.
But at that period of time, you just kind of kept things quiet, so all I did was go to the library, and I went to the young adult section and also the regular adult section and not the kids section to bring out books of real sightings, real happenings.
Right.
Because I wanted to understand what was going on. It helped a great deal. So rather than just reading up on little kiddie stories like the Nancy Drew mysteries and things like that, these were actual stories. And I even found the original clipping in my area for the original Exorcist, the actual happening.
Wow.
And all of that was fascinating, and it made a lot of sense to me, all the experiences.
What sort of things did you see in the house?
Well, I would see a shadow. A gentleman, probably about 5'7", 5'8", and I could never really see his face. It was just like an outline, and I could see somewhat of his clothing, but I could never actually see his face. And I also saw objects move. I saw my father's tools moving. My mother's hairbrush moved all the way across her dresser one day.
Wow.
And another thing that was odd is that whoever it was that was in this house did not like mirrors. He hated mirrors.
Really?
And he would turn regular mirrors, handheld mirrors, he would turn them upside down. The ones that you had on the wall, he would turn them around on the nail so that you couldn't see yourself. Or he would open up the medicine cabinet so that the mirror would be pointing into the room instead of at your face. It was an interesting experience.
How do you know it was a he? Did you gain some insight on the spirit over the years?
Once I realized that his form was more like a male, and the fact that he was wearing trousers, I referred to him as trousers instead of pants. When my sister said that she had seen something similar to it, we both kind of came to the conclusion, and by the time I talked to my sister, I had already seen a number of other things. In my neighborhood, at my grandparents' house, which is one of the stories that I sent you to read. After all of this, I began to be more in tune to who he was, as far as being a male, his approximate age, what time period he came from. And we nicknamed him Reggie, Sir Reginald. We didn't know what his name was or anything, but we just called him Sir Reginald, and Reggie for short. He seemed to like it, so it stuck.
Okay, Sir Reginald, the ghost story of Sir Reginald, your childhood Casper, basically. Wow.
Yes.
And this is not something that stopped. As you grew up, you continued to see spirits and ghosts pretty much all the time. What's it like for you? What's the experience feel like? Are there physical symptoms? Do you get chills? Do you catch things out of the corners of your eyes? Does your heart seize up?
Generally, when I walk into a location, it's very difficult to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it before, because all sensitives, all mediums, and all psychics have different trigger points for knowing that there is spiritual activity. Mine, I just get this, I suppose you would refer to it as a knocking on my head, right. On the left side of my head. Like there's a doorway to my head, and I can almost feel somebody touching my head and trying to talk to me. And I can either choose to open that door and let them talk, or keep it closed, depending on how I'm feeling.
Right.
And that's pretty much it. And I don't see as many full-bodied apparitions. I mostly see them with my third eye. Okay. I get impressions of things just in my mind's eye.
Right.
So.
And you've learned to interpret those things and trust your intuition on what you're seeing, right? Yes. I've had to fine-tune it, and I've gotten some great advice for some absolutely wonderful people in this field who have been experiencing things a lot longer than I have, and or have opened themselves up to them a lot more than I have. And they've given me some wonderful advice, some tips, how to center myself, to ground myself, and to interpret what is going on, whether or not it's my imagination, whether or not it's the truth, and so forth. So,
as far as all the apparitions that you've seen, the full-bodied ones, or you interpret as seeing, what was the one that sticks out most in your mind? What was just something that you always return back to when you think back on all your experiences?
That would have to be James. Yes, that story is in my book. It's one of the most profound stories, or experiences, I should say, that I've ever had. And I look at that experience now, and it was probably a turning point in accepting my abilities. Okay. And realizing that I had this ability. And I can still see him. I can still see him in my head.
Well, let's play that for our audience. This is James from Cathy, recorded by our British folk singer David Walton, from her amazing collection of her true ghost experiences, My Life Amidst the Paranormal, which you can find on Amazon.com, and we will have links up for that on the show website at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com. I downloaded the book onto my Kindle, $4.99, and I'm really quite enjoying it. So this is James from Cathy Gasch, read by David Walton on What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show.
James, written by Cathy E. Gasch, September 23rd, 2014, for her book My Life Amidst the Paranormal, published by Haunted Road Media and read by David Walton. When I was a little girl, my fears of the dark and unknown were limited to the boogeyman, who was used as a threat of punishment if I misbehaved. Ghosts? Well, they were not thought of as the spectre of dead people or something to be feared, but kids running around in sheets making moaning sounds on Halloween, or Jasper the Friendly Ghost on Saturday morning cartoons. Never did I realise that in August of 1965 I would learn what a ghost really was. Each year my family would visit my father's parents at their home in rural West Virginia during school vacation. Their home was a late 19th century Victorian with beautiful woodwork and spacious rooms. My sister, 5 years older, and I would share the bedroom at the top of the stairs. Directly next to the bedroom was the door to the attic. The closet in our room was built so that you could see under the attic steps. My grandmother would use every closet in every room to store sheets and blankets, but she never used the one in ours. Instead, it was dark, filled with cobwebs, and there was a single rusted coat hanger on the pole. My sister and I used the hook on the back of the door instead. I never liked being in that room alone for some reason, and if my sister wasn't ready for bed, despite being sleepy, I would fall asleep on the sofa instead, waiting for her. During that visit, for a few days, all was ordinary. I slept well, spent the days exploring the area, and had my sister dare me to go by myself into the nearby cemetery. It wasn't really spooky, despite being overgrown with brush, nor was I afraid of ghosts. But I was afraid of snakes, so I never accepted her dare. After a long day, my sister and I went on to bed. My sister always slept on the side next to the door. I slept next to the window, because I've always needed light to sleep, and the outside street light was a comfort. Being August, the night was warm, but we had a single sheet at the foot of the bed. Soon after my sister had lain down, she was asleep and lightly snoring. I was about to doze off myself when the room became cold. So cold that I pulled the sheet all the way up to my neck, but leaving my left foot sticking out. Just then I noticed that there was an odd light that seemed to be in front of the door to the unused closet. It was not the outside light reflection. Instead, it began to get brighter, and I could make out the shape of a head, shoulders and arms. My heart was racing. What was I seeing? I tried to call out to my sister, but found that I had no voice. I couldn't even make a whisper, so I reached out with my right hand and grabbed her by the shoulder and shook as hard as I could. No matter how hard I pulled her back and forth, she wouldn't wake up. My first thought is that she was dead, and I was trying to get up to find someone when the shape became that of a young boy about my own age. My fright kept me frozen to the bed. There was no colour at all to the boy, just a milky white glow, and I could see that he was wearing a long shirt with ruffles around his cuff, ruffles at his neck, and his hair was long and pulled back with a ribbon. By this time, the room was cold enough that I could see my breath. I was shaking so hard that my teeth were chattering, and I was so frightened that my entire body was rigid. With my eyes wide as saucers, I watched this young boy move from the closet door and make his way across the floor towards me. It was then that I noticed that he didn't seem to be walking, but gliding, and he had no feet. Where his feet should have been was only his ankles, like his feet were below the floor and not on it. Within moments, this young boy had come to the foot of our bed, and to my horror I noticed that he had stopped near my exposed left foot and was leaning over with his hand outstretched, like he was going to touch it. I still don't know if I said it aloud. I just know what I was thinking at that time. When he reached down to touch my foot, I thought I said, "Oh no you don't," and kicked upwards. At this, the boy bolted upright and disappeared like someone blowing into a cloud of cigarette smoke. I looked all around the room, but the light was gone, and all I could see in the dim light from outside was just the room. The room had become warm again, and I could hear my sister snoring. Whether I passed out from fright or just fell asleep, I don't know. But the next thing I remember was waking up. My sister was gone, and smelling bacon from the kitchen. That morning I joined everyone for breakfast and spent every moment I could away from the house, never telling anyone what had happened. My reason for not telling anyone: I had remembered hearing my mother and grandmother saying that people who saw ghosts are either crazy or strange, so what I had seen in the bedroom that night I was not to share with anyone for another 6 years. When I got home from that vacation, I visited our local libraries and took out every book I could find on ghosts, fact and fiction. I had to find answers to what had happened to me. Many books later, I learned that ghosts are supposed to be the apparitions of those whose spirit still lingers and can manifest itself on our plane of existence. I was startled to learn that they need some type of energy to take form, even if it means taking it from the living. It started to make sense now. The room being so cold, why my sister wouldn't wake up. This young boy needed as much energy as he could to show himself to me. But why show himself to me? Who was he? Why was he there? It wasn't until I was in my late teens that I learned that where my grandparents lived was a late 18th century settlement, and their very neighbourhood had a huge fort known as Blockhouse Hill. Over the years, while tilling their garden, my grandparents had found flints, arrowheads, bullets and knife blades, along with bits of pottery to mark where the settlement had been. I also learned that the cemetery across the way had many graves of those first settlers, with markers you could no longer read because of a few hundred years of wear. When my grandmother was moving from the house in the 1980s, she asked that my mother and I visit to get some items she wanted us to have. One afternoon, I asked my grandmother if she ever had any strange or odd experiences in the house. Much to my surprise, she said she had been seeing and hearing a little boy ever since they moved there in the late 1950s. He would call out, "Mom," to her, and she would see him mostly upstairs. When I asked about why she never used the closet in our room, she said she always felt someone was there, so she didn't use it. She never was afraid in the house, just a type of sadness that it was a little boy. After telling her about my experience as a child, she just nodded in affirmation and asked why I never said anything. Well, because I would have been pumped full of drugs and placed in a straitjacket, I said. She laughed and admitted I was probably right. To learn from her that I wasn't imagining or dreaming what had happened was very validating, and I was finally able to tell others of the experience. Years later, when I was visiting the area with my mother, sister and her young son, we passed by the beautiful old Victorian home that I remembered so well. Gone were the beautiful etched and frosted glass doors. New siding was installed, and the land was divided by fences. It looked kind of sad. As we were leaving, we passed by the old cemetery, and I asked my sister to pull the car over for me. I got out, followed by my nephew, and we made our way up the overgrown hill to the gate. Someone had tended to the grounds, with much of the brush gone, and you could now see many of the old markers dotting the land. As I wandered around, trying to read names and dates, despite it being a warm July day, I got a chill and found myself drawn to an area that had yet to be cleared of briars. There I noticed a small marker, no bigger than a football, and it had the crude shape of a lamb and a very worn and unreadable inscription. Staring at this tiny marker and feeling as though someone was standing beside me, I looked around expecting to see my nephew, but he had gotten bored and was on his way back down the hill to the car. Suddenly, I remembered the apparition of the young boy that August evening so many years ago. I started to feel cold and truly felt as though someone had taken a hold of my hand. And that's when I heard it, a soft, tiny voice saying, "I am James." I felt tears well up in my eyes and I softly said, "Hello, James. We met many years ago. I'm Cathy." Then slowly the air became warm again and I was alone next to that tiny marker still covered with briars. I walked back to the car with a smile on my face and in my heart. He remembered me and let me know where he was laid. It once again took a while for me to relay the experience. In many ways, it was a rather private moment. To this day, no matter how much research I have done, I don't know who James was or when he lived, but no matter what, having him come to me touched my life in ways I can't explain, or feelings I can't express. Ghosts? I've never really been afraid of them, and since that young boy showed me that we still exist somehow when we pass, I'm not really afraid of death either. Permission granted by Cathy E. Gasch for use by T. Fox Dunham of the Para-X radio show, What Are You Afraid Of? To be used as a script for actors for the radio show on which I will be a guest. No other permission of its use is authorized at this time. January 10, 2018.
What happens to a ghost when their home is torn down? No one thinks of the disembodied when they rip down old buildings, dig up cemeteries, and build clean, unhauntable condos. Every year, hundreds of spirits are driven out of their old haunts by the careless living to exist alone with no one to scare. At Para-X Radio, our hosts feel the plight of these evicted disembodied, and we're reaching out to you to please open your heart to one of these lost souls, such as the ghost soldier of the General Wayne Inn or the abandoned spirit cat of Benjamin Rush. So please, please, let a little spooky into your life. Won't you open your house to a ghost without a home?
Para-X.
Mercy, a new horror medical thriller from author T. Fox Dunham, published by Bloodbound Books. Based on the author's horrific battle with a rare form of lymphoma that involved intense chemotherapy and radiation, Fox turns the horror of his experience into terror on the page.
William Saint is dying of cancer. On most days, death seems like a humane alternative to the treatment. Stricken with fever, William is rushed to Mercy, notorious as a place to send the sickest of the poor and uninsured to be forgotten, and finds the hospital in even worse condition than his previous visit.
Willie's memories faded. He grabbed his sack head of the scarecrow, picking at the exposed chicken wire to hold them in. However, the memories fell out of the holes in his face. They wormed and crawled from the leather flesh and the old clothing of the scarecrow, then squirmed and wiggled down his body.
The grounds are unkempt, the foundation is cracking, and like the wild mushrooms sprouting from the fissures of decay around it, something is growing inside the hospital. Something dark.
Fangoria gives Mercy 3.5 out of 4 skulls. Dunham has channeled his many brushes with the other side into the exquisitely rendered, lyrical, supernatural hospital thriller Mercy.
It's feeding on the sickness and sustaining itself on the staff, changing them, and now it wants Willie.
Come now, Mr. Saint. Just a little more of that sweet milk. So salty and so good. You won't miss it. and we ever do so like our delicacies here at Mercy Hospital.
Part medical horror, part supernatural suspense, Mercy is a hard-hitting fever dream of a novel. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Tim Wagner, author of The Way of All Flesh and Eat the Night. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere in both print and digital versions.
Life is an addiction.
Let go. Let it all burn.
You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. Yeah, it's a mouthful. For more great shows, visit electronicmediacollective.com.
So David did a great job reading that one.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, we love David Walton. He's been a great friend of the show, and he's doing a lot of recording for us. And that does sound like a powerful experience, one that's stayed with you. And reading your book, Cathy, well, like I said, one of the things I really liked was how you traveled to Ireland and Scotland several times. And I don't know if you were aware of this. It's my original home, and I actually took my wife, Alison, back to Edinburgh, and we were married there.
Oh,
at Prestonfield,
I did not know that.
At Prestonfield House. We spent 2 days in Edinburgh, and then we spent 2 days in Ireland. We went down to Dublin and took the train down the coast to Killarney, to Bray, to some of the cities some of the villages along the beach, and then spent a few days in London. And just about in every building we stayed in, we had a paranormal experience of some kind. Like in the hotel we stayed in Dublin, I heard this walking in the room, and I thought my wife had gotten up to go to the bathroom, and then I found her next to me, and whatever it was actually came over and pressed down the side of the bed. And she, of course, my wife just slept through it. It's like, honey, what's that? That's some sort of phantom nightsman. One of Oliver Cromwell's soldiers come into the room. A ghost, honey. Okay, will you tell him to keep it down? I really need to get to sleep. That's how my wife is with the paranormal. She's just kind of like, yeah, it's fine and all. You can haunt. Just don't bother me when I'm sleeping or when I'm in school.
That's the way my husband is as well. Well, if they're not going to wake me up, just let me sleep. Never mind, let him go. He's exactly the same way.
And you kind of have to be. I think she's sensitive, or at least I wouldn't know if she feels things, but I think it's more that she's been equipped to handle things. Like she's got a suit of armor or some sort of field that things just don't pass through. Instead of denying that they're there, which is what most people do to survive them, she just accepts them as part of the ecology.
Right.
Yes.
Natural elements.
I do. That's the exact same way that I do it. It's part of my everyday existence, and you just have to learn to either shut it off, ignore it, or go with it. Mm-hmm. It's your choice what you want to do.
Do you see or feel ghosts like anywhere you go, or is it like something that just you can't shut off, or is it just everywhere all the time, or is it coming and going?
As long as I allow myself to open up to it, I can sense it anywhere I go.
Okay.
But there's times when I will go to a location because I'm going out to dinner or I'm going out with friends or something like that. I specifically tune myself out for it because that's not why I'm there. I'm there for dinner, I'm there for laughs, that sort of thing. But if I'm just casually walking through an area, I might open myself up to feel what might be there. And if they appear to be something that I'd like to communicate with, then I'll just open that door in my head and say, hello, come knocking. I'll talk to you. Let me know your story.
Do they ever come to you? I mean, do you ever get... I know you go to them often, which is what happens in the book, but do the ghosts, these spirits or whatever they are, those who have passed, are you ever at home and different ones will come to you to communicate something?
Yes, I've had that happen. More than I can say, especially over the last, say, 3-4 years. And sometimes there are people that want to communicate with people that I know. So they're there to have me pass along messages or ask questions of people that I know. But then there was one person that has come to me quite often in the past year that I still don't know why he came to me. I'm sitting there listening to an internet radio show with oldies music, and suddenly this person shows up And it turns out that he was a Marine that passed away in the Mekong Delta in 1969.
Oh, okay.
And I couldn't figure out why he was coming to me.
Yeah.
Didn't have a clue. So I started talking to a few other friends of mine who are both psychic mediums, actually. And they remotely tried to feel what I was feeling at the time. And they picked up on him and said, well, the reason that he came to you, Kat, was that he just happened to be in the neighborhood and realized that you could hear and see him.
Mm.
It was like the antenna just went up.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So he realized, oh, hey.
Here's someone that
Yep.
that's going to see and hear me, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Because not everybody could. Right. So he stops by every now and then, and it's really funny because when I'm listening to this oldies program, sometimes he will come to me and he'll say, can you ask the DJ to play thus and such song?
Huh. Really?
So I'll get on the chat, and I'll tell this DJ, could you please play it? And now this particular DJ is also into the paranormal. Okay. So he knows that if I'm asking a request from this particular spirit, he will make sure that he finds that song. And he'll play it for him. And he'll even say it over the air. This is for Kat's friend who stopped in and made this request. And I can tell that this spirit is standing behind me and he's just boogieing down. He's just dancing away and smiling and carrying on. I mean, I love it.
Nice.
I'm glad he's happy.
Do you recall any of the song requests he's made?
Yeah.
Well, he loves the grassroots, and he likes what we refer to as bubblegum music, like the 1910 Fruit Gum Company and the Ohio Express, and people like that. And he also likes a bit of psychedelic music. So he was a hippie.
Well, yeah,
I was just a Marine.
Yeah.
Cathy Gasch, ghost DJ. I love it.
Oh, that's a great story.
You haven't had any visits from a ghost, a Texan by the name of Paxton, have you, in the recent months?
I've had a few people come to me that I don't have a clue who they were. Sometimes they come up to me and they'll start to say something, and then they will get distracted and move away before I've had a chance to focus. So I don't know. There's a possibility.
Paxton was a friend of ours to the show and to the radio station, a good friend, and he passed away recently to New Year's, and I keep thinking, because he knew what we were doing, that if he could get a message to us somehow, that he would. So every time I talk to a psychic or a sensitive now, I'm going to ask, has Paxton been in touch?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
I will certainly try to hone in on whoever might be coming to me. Because there's occasions when I really don't want to be bothered, and I'll let them know, hey, look, I'm not up for it tonight. Could you please move on?
Yeah, I just got done making dinner. I'm tired.
Yeah, I mean, it would be nice. He died suddenly and wasn't able to communicate with a lot of people, so I'm sure he's got some things to say.
If he does come to me, I will certainly let you know.
Reading your book, and you've been to a lot of ancient areas, do you find that there are places in the world that lend themselves more to hauntings, like an Irish castle or a Scottish manor house, as opposed to a condo in Maryland? Do you think the older, more ancient a place is, the more active it is?
I don't really think that the age of the building or the age of the location really hasn't much to do with it, other than the fact that it's had more time to acquire a certain amount of spiritual energy. More people have died in that location. Right. So that's a possibility. But I find that more often than not, the only real reason that some of the places in Ireland, in Scotland, and in England, where I've been, the reason that there is a lot more spiritual activity is because over the years, the culture of those countries allows themselves to believe more than, say, here in the United States. So, and with that in mind, the spirits know that people are more apt to allow them to come and say hi in England, Ireland, Scotland, than they are here in the United States. It's all a matter of belief system and your culture.
Right.
Okay, that
makes sense.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's more about people being receptive than it is about age.
Yes.
We're going to end the show tonight with part one of an interview that I did with a fascinating British horror author, and his name is Jasper Bark. and I was able to sit down with this wonderfully charming and intelligent fellow, and we'll play part 1 of his interview tonight. So did you have a good show, Phil?
Oh, yeah, it
with
was great.
Cathy?
It was great. It was great talking to her. Yes.
Yeah. Are you looking forward to the next one with her?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And what wonderful ghost stories, and just a very different tone of ghost stories than we usually hear with some of the people that we usually get people on the show like Debbie Chestnut or Galen Chauncey, who has been haunted by terrible evil and darkness. You know, and it's nice just to have someone come on who's just as sensitive and telling us these non-threatening stories.
Yeah, it's a breath of fresh air.
It really is, a breath of fresh air. Well, thank you, Cathy, for being on the show. You've been incredible, and we look forward to talking to you next week.
Most definitely. And next time we talk, I've got a very interesting tidbit of story, the ending of the story of James that pertains to the book. So I hope, I'll be able to give you guys a little bit of insight as to how much more special that story is to me now.
Oh, definitely. We'll ask you very soon. And this has been What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show. You can find her book at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com. We'll have links up to Cathy, her website, and her book there. Plus all of our previous 72 shows, Phil. Oh, my word. And a lot of our ghost stories that have been sent in are also available there, plus information about the author and more content about the locations in the book and things like that. Well, this has been episode 73. This is Fox.
This is Phil.
I'm Jenna Valadez with the Basement Files. Tune in Friday nights, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Para-X Radio Network.
Caliburn Press, LLC is a Madison, Wisconsin-based publishing company owned and operated by Alan Ledden. Caliburn works with talented writers, artists, editors, and marketers throughout the United States, and you can find their books through their many imprints that include Damnation Books, Eternal Press, Malefiria Press, Ciento Sordida Publishing, and Spiro Publishing. Please visit their website at sites.google.com/site/Caliburn Press LLC/home, or Google Caliburn Press to check out their growing list of titles on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and any other place fine books are sold.
Crawl in, the worms crawl out, they crawl all over your dirty snout, your chest.
My name is David Walton. I am a vocal performer for What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show, and I have carried the burden of a terrible secret. I am actually what is offensively called a ghost. For years now, I have concealed my ectoplasmic existence from my friends and family, in fear of a common prejudice against ghosts, or what we like to call the disembodied. I have existed frightened of being discovered, unable to do physical acts that the embodied take for granted, such as walking a squirrel, or drinking a glass of vitamin E milk fresh squeezed from a whale. I grew depressed and even considered acts of self-harm or reincarnation, which is suicide for the disembodied. Such movies as Ghostbusters and its sequels drove my feelings of disenfranchisement, and I began looking for help, only to encounter painful exorcisms in the houses I haunted. Then I met two good people, it says here, Fox and Phil, at What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal. And they helped me take control of my own life. Now, it is my choice whether I wish to make phantom bangs in the night, appear at the foot of your bed in darkness, or make your walls bleed. If you are a disembodied person like I am, and you're living a lie, What Are You Afraid Of? Can help you too. They are on at 9 p.m. on Friday nights at Para-X Radio, leaving plenty of time for midnight haunting activities, and can be found on all major podcast services. Listen to their paranormal stories, interviews, humorous sketches and horror fiction to know that you are not alone. And if you are a member of the embodied, don't forget, you are only a single heart attack or tumour away from becoming one of us. This is David Walton. See you on the other side, or as I call it, this side.
And that is the end of a perfect day.
Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
One of the best things about hosting a show like What Are You Afraid Of is all the extraordinarily interesting, brilliant, and colorful people from around the world in all time that I've had the great circumstance of meeting. And on this show, as we move into our next winter, Halloween is done. Now we need ghost stories and good authors to get us through the hard, cold times as we move on to the spring. We're going to be speaking with Jasper Bark, and Jasper finds writing author biographies and talking about himself in the third person faintly embarrassing as we read his biography. But he's an award-winning author of 4 cult novels, including the highly acclaimed Way of the Barefoot Zombie. Just sounds like boasting, he says. He's very modest. He has to mention, though, that he's written 12 children's books, hundreds of comics and graphic novels, and he cringes when he has to reveal that his work has been translated into 9 different languages and is used in schools throughout the UK to help improve literacy, or that he was awarded the This Is Horror Award for his last anthology, Dead Air. He thinks he might be too British, or perhaps he needs a good enema. How are you this evening, Jasper? Thank you for being here.
I am very well, and it's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on the show, Fox.
Absolutely. It's thanks to creative talent such as yourself that we have such good content for our listeners. So did you have a fun Halloween?
I had a fabulous Halloween, as it happens, actually. Usually, I run a little ghost walk I live in a ancient medieval town that stretches back, in fact, to kind of pre-Roman times. So there's been people settled in the little burg in which I inhabit for around and about almost 3,000 years, they think. Archaeological evidence points at that. So with that many people in such a small little place, there's a lot of lives being lived. There's a lot of kind of psychic residue, I imagine. I don't know that much about this. So there's an awful lot of ghost stories and a lot of old, very spooky looking buildings. So I always run a Halloween ghost walk. And before that, of course, I hand out candy. I'm a parent myself, though I now have 2 teenage daughters who would cringe at the idea of accompanying their father out to go trick-or-treating, that they usually go to parties and stuff. And then when I get back from the ghost walk, I usually have a couple of nice shots of whiskey and I watch a horror movie with my lovely wife. I live out in the West Country, so if there's anyone literally listening, I live, if you've ever read books by Jane Austen or Thomas Hardy, they're all set in the West Country. That's kind of there I live. And in fact, it hasn't really changed very much since those guys were writing books. And you still can't get a broadband connection. In fact, it isn't really any better than it probably was in the 1800s.
I was contacted by Joe Meinhardt over at Crystal Lake Publishing. And how did you get involved with Joe?
Joe contacted me for the very first professional anthology that he launched. And he asked if I would like to submit a story for that. That was for the 90s Dark. And I wrote him a story for that. I didn't really know him very well. But about 4 or 5 months later, my wife and I went out to South Africa, where Joe lives. My wife and her sister grew up in South Africa. Their parents were political missionaries, and they work for peace and reconciliation behind the scenes with people from the government, with people from the ANC. So my wife knows the place really quite well. And it just so happened that we were passing quite near to the town where Joe lived. So I said, we must drop in and see this guy. And we did. And Joe and I actually became very good friends. And after that, he asked me if I had anything else that I would like to submit to Crystal Lake. And he'd love to publish it. And as it happens, Crystal Lake are an incredibly professional outfit, and incredibly supportive of authors in every way, from making certain the text that they present and it's published is as flawless and faultless as possible, all the way through to helping to promote and publish and push your work. So they were a great publisher to work with. I had such a good experience working with them on my first collection, which I published with them, which was Stuck on You and Other Prime Cuts, that quite simply once a year at least I brought out a book with them.
Fantastic, and it sounds like you've had a great experience, and you were very lucky to meet Joe. Crystal Lake has held up. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the political situation, but over the last few years, indie press has been dying off like it's got some sort of epidemic.
I said some really great publishers have gone to the wall. We've
had a very good experience with Joe, and I know the books look incredible, and there aren't many publishers left that are holding their own, I would say. He's probably one at the top. Every time I mention this, people always go Crystal Lake, so they're very impressed with him. And of course, Grey Matter Press, PMMP is holding on, Dark Regions is holding on, and it's hard to think of too many others that are really out there anymore fighting in the indie community. And now, as a professional author, are you seeing a change in your working environment? Like when I go looking for markets to submit work to, I have such a small list now of professional markets.
I'm kind of lucky in that I've always kept a foot both in mainstream and independent publishing. And I'm still in a situation where more people are approaching me asking for work than I actually have work to give. So that's a nice situation to be in. I think it's more, I lament more the fact as a reader that there are less really great indie presses out there championing the new voices that we need to hear. There are a lot of people, I think, doing it more for the love of it now, bringing out anthologies of new writers without any recourse to actually making a living out of it. And the people like Joe are running things very much as a two-man operation. I think Sinister Grin are also just hanging on by the skin of their teeth as well, along with the other people that you mentioned, and still putting out some very good people, as I believe is J. Ellington Ash.
Yes. Right. It's just, it's hard. I know so many editors. I'm in close contact with many of them. I have been for years. And many of them are telling me about how much they're struggling. And what's the remedy? People aren't buying the books. And they're good books. I mean, as I tell people now, you need to be more than a good author to be a successful author. You need to be able to market.
Marketing is absolutely key to your success as an author, and not just if you are an indie author, if you're a self-published author, if you are working with big mainstream publishers. They just don't have the budgets they used to, and what budgets they do have, they are throwing entirely at their tentpole authors, the authors that are going to keep them in the black and carry them through into the next year. So if you've got a really good mainstream publisher behind you, they'll do a tiny little bit of publicity for you, but the rest is down to you and your own ingenuity. So it pays to read and watch a lot of online courses about marketing. There's loads of tutorials. It pays to master social media and every other avenue open to you, and to keep plugging away at those.
So how much time do you spend writing, and how much time do you spend?
That's a very tough one. It rather depends what project I'm working on. At the moment, it's probably this precise moment in time. I have 2 novels I've been commissioned to write that I'm trying to get through. But I've just released a whole raft of different projects, so it's probably 60% marketing at the moment and 40% actually writing. It should be really for a good kind of career balance. It really should be about 60% writing and 40% marketing, but sometimes you need to give things a really big push. And also, as an author, I've actually got several things out with independent publishers, and you will tend to make your biggest haul in the first 4-5 months of a release, and then it will sort of tail off, and then you can keep propping it up a little bit, and every time you release something new, all the boats kind of like floating in your marina, as it were, we'll get a sudden surge and they'll rise a little bit because of all the publicity you're doing. But in these kind of key months, you have to keep plugging your projects as much as possible. So that's kind of, it's not an ideal balance, but it just has to be done because it's part of your job these days.
Yeah, publishers expect you to promote and market your own works now, and it's very
Agents do also. Agents, when they're looking at you, when they're taking you on as a prospective client, they're going to look at what your internet presence is like, how many hits you got in your blog. If you have a YouTube channel, how many people are clicking on it. These are all key indicators to your potential marketability. So yes, unfortunately, we can no longer sit in our ivory towers thinking our beautiful thoughts and dashing off the odd sonnet. We have to be out there in the trenches, grinding away.
Wonderful.
Yeah, winning over readers, one reader at a time.
T. Fox Dunham lives in Philadelphia with his wife Allison. He's a lymphoma survivor, cancer patient, modern bard and historian. His first book, The Street Martyr, was published by Gutter Book, a major motion picture based on the book is being produced by Throughline Films. Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, a book about what it's like to be dying of cancer, was recently released from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and Fox has a story in the Stargate anthology, Points of Origin, from MGM and Fandemonium Books. Mercy was recently released by Bloodbound Books. Fox is an active member of the Harvard Association. He's been published in hundreds of short stories and articles, and his motto is Wrecking Civilization, one story at a time.
Phil Thomas resides in the suburbs of Philadelphia and is an author and filmmaker. His screenplays have been produced into feature films such as False Face and Always from Darkness that are available in major retailers such as Best Buy and Target, as well as availability on Netflix and Amazon On Demand.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.